Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now my guest today is the entrepreneur Cephas Williams. His campaign 56 Black Men holds a hard-hitting message brought to life in its iconic tagline in the making. I am not my stereotype. It's a message that's gracing billboards across London, and Cephas is here to tell us more. Welcome, Cephas, to the show. Pleasure to have you on, not least because we first met, I think, when you were 19 on the Startup Britain campaign.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what happened next. What makes you tick?
Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, man, we met on the Startup Britain situation. And what makes me tick, I guess, for me, solving something, you know what I mean? And seeing the world in a different way, and seeing a gap that I can solve, and that's what's been moving me since.
Right. I mean, and you've come to the fore about this issue, especially about young black men, 56 Black Men as a campaign. Tell us a little bit about what it is, what's driving it.
Yeah. So for me, I guess I just got quite simply put, I got fed up with seeing black men spotlighted in a negative light, and it really felt like there was an agenda against the image of a black man. And every time in a newspaper, I'd look in the newspaper, it'd be, black man is a victim or perpetrator of violence, and there's people in prison that are white, black women, white men, white women, Asian, whatever, and you don't see that representation as much as you see the black man.
So when you think about that image, just bring it to life for us, the image that you're fighting against, the stereotype that you want to break down.
Yeah, so for me, it's like, that, every black man is in some way, shape or form connected to violence or connected to something negative. And I think it has a detrimental impact on us externally, so the way the general public view us, but also internally, perhaps the way we view ourselves.
Okay, so self-image.
Yeah, man. And almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. And my mission is, how do you change the trajectory if we continue to show the same images?
Yeah, I mean, I read something that you said. You said, I'm a black man with a degree in architecture, and I find I'm not taken seriously when I walk into a room full of strangers. I mean, just give us a sense of what it feels like to walk around feeling like that.
Yeah, we've got a very short space of time, Michael. It's a lot. I don't know. I try not to think about so much these days, and I think, that's a problem in itself. That many of us and people that I've spoken to have to get to a point where we actually try not to think about it, or try not to, try to move different. But we should be able to be ourselves, and the reality is we don't feel we can.
I mean, on the media side of this, I mean, we know about the Raheem Sterling quote about a black footballer splashing out on a mansion and a white player buying a £2 million investment for his mother. I mean, this kind of like the different standards. I mean, do you see that the media has got a part to play in terms of the change?
It's a great point. And so for me, part of our mission is to put people with the lived experience at the forefront of the conversation. The reasons why I feel a lot of those things happen is because people that are writing about us in the media and the people that are talking about our story in the media don't actually have the lived experience of what it feels like to be a black man. And really quick example, the Good Morning Britain situation, where it was a panel of 3 white men and 3 white women talking about how we can solve knife crime in the black community, and a black weatherman shouts out across the room, he wasn't even in the conversation. Because if you've not experienced what it feels like to be a black man, I don't really feel like you're qualified to be at the forefront of that conversation.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about the campaign, the impact that you're hoping to make with 56 Black Men. Who's involved, what it's there to do? It's
a great question. So for me, I feel like the impact speaks for itself currently. People can plug into our social media and our website and stuff and get a great sense for that. And quite simply put, this is how I coin it. Any great, I feel, social move or campaign has to have 2 simple things, and I'm writing about this in the book I'm writing. I feel like we have to be very clear about what we're fighting against, and we have to be very clear about who we're fighting for. And so for us, we're fighting against the negative images that are often seen in the media of black men. So as long as there's negative portrayal of black men in the media, we'll have something to fight against. And as long as black men need to be empowered, we'll have someone to fight for.
Right. I mean, when you see that negative portrayal, is there an action? I mean, what do you feel you can do with this campaign to call it out, to correct it?
Get it completely. I feel like we could take that power back. you know, we can start to take control of our conversation and reframe that narrative, you know, and start to spotlight more positive stories.
It gives a sense of the 56 black men, because it's a thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, to tell us a little bit about who's in it.
Yeah. So, you know, it ranges from plumbers to politicians. Do you know what I mean? So
Quite a range.
There you go. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't pick these men myself. I picked a handful of men, and then I asked everyone to suggest people, because I didn't want it to become just people I selected and my mates, you know, and I wanted it to show that we're connected and there's a vast range. So actually, you know, it kind of organically chose the people it chose, you know what I mean?
It chose the people it chose, but I mean, you know, obviously one of those contributors, David Lammy, for example, the Tottenham MP.
He's a politician, you know.
How did you get him on board?
So someone suggested him, you know what I mean? And it's funny because I didn't know who David was before I met him, funny enough. I just knew he was an MP, and you know, that's a cool, you know, job title to spotlight. You know, we've got a trainee surgeon who's actually a surgeon, he's in there. We've got a dentist in there. We've got, you know, people that work in all sorts of
I mean, one of the
work.
things I thought was interesting about David Lammy was that when I was reading one of the pieces of media on this, is that him talking about how he feels when he's suited and booted doing his job as a kind of MP versus to what he's doing when he's sort of, you know, I mean, in his words, throwing on jeans, wearing hoodies, that kind of thing.
That was the Guardian article.
That was the Guardian, right. But I mean, that issue about self-image and about how we feel. I mean, the hoodie comes up, right, as a big issue in this campaign. Tell us a bit more about that.
I think it's a powerful point you drew out of the article, and it's funny because I remember when I was waiting for the article to be written, because me and David Lammy had a conversation prior, and I felt like because we'd already achieved so much momentum and the brand was a brand that spoke for the people, it could almost make or break the situation. And I think he did a good job of the article, and you know, attaching the hoodie to the conversation is interesting because again, it speaks for itself, and we've got a lot of messages back, and it's a lot of people that, particularly because David Lammy is generally seen on a public front with a suit, it's like, rah, when I saw him like that, he could equally be one of these people that I've stereotyped.
But tell us about, I mean, you're wearing a hoodie, right? I mean, but tell us about the hoodie in terms of, because it's a totemic issue, right? I mean, David Cameron talked about hugging a hoodie, right? You know, you've got mainstream leaders talking about it, both positively and negatively. Tell us about the why. Tell us about what it represents.
Good question. So for me, I guess that's part of the artistic direction, as I've mentioned quite a few times. And it's not there for black men to become a caricature of this idea of wearing a hoodie, because as you know, I don't wear hoodies all the time. Sometimes I've got a blazer on, sometimes but there is something that's moved in people. It might not be everybody, but it's something that's moved in people when they see that image of a black man in a hoodie. And if I was to sit here and articulate why, we'd probably be here for ages. But
what's moved? What that would give us?
So I'll give you an example. So one lady sent a message back saying, you know, this campaign has completely changed her life as a white lady. And that when she saw this image of black men in a hoodie, all of these negative stereotypes came to her. And now, moving forward, when she's on the road and she's on the streets, and I think the biggest tie-in is who she's going to start seeing and how she's going to perceive them. And it's a lot of younger people and people my age that wear hoodies or similar clothing, but as a result of the way that item has been almost demonised next to this image in the news about black men.
I mean, I love the slogan.
Doesn't speak well for us.
I love the slogan, I'm not my stereotype.
Yeah.
But in terms of how you get beyond that, how you end the stereotype through a campaign like this, how do you do that? What's the? I mean, can you do that, or is it just a contribution?
Got a lot of good questions today.
That's my job.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd be lying if I said I have the answer. You know what I mean? I don't have an answer. I just have the ability to do something, and I did. I took 56 images of men in hoodies. I put a strategy behind it as an organisation and from an artistic standpoint, and it did what it did. And I will never view the world through your eyes or through the next person's eyes, but the messages received are crazy, and how it will solve, will it solve, you know?
And people are excited about it, right? You've got some very powerful backers now, lots of people getting involved with this.
I think the interesting part about what you're saying, I want to make this clear because a lot of people will see it as well, it's not the magic of a campaign. There's a lot of strategy and you know, powerful people backing it. I've had powerful people backing me from before 56. All I've done now is put my face out there. And you know, what I've managed to do behind the scenes is a lot of my senior contacts are now looking at this conversation at the same time.
I mean, when we look at the next steps for 56 black men, when we look at what can we expect next, I mean, how do you keep this being remarkable, exciting, relevant?
It's a great question. I think it's timeless as a piece for the generation that appreciates the power of that image, being the black man in the hoodie. And now, as a symbol, I feel like, you know, that black man, the image of a black man wearing a hoodie represents the idea of changing the narrative. So I'm not in any, you know, particular pressure to try and keep it relevant, but I'm going to keep doing the headshots as an artistic response. As a business, we're not interested in recreating or reinventing the wheel. There are a lot of black men out there doing a lot of great things already. My duty and what I'm trying to do with this platform is create a platform that amplifies them, supports them, and puts them in the spotlight. That is our mission. And so whatever we do moving forward will be to do that and to foster those conversations.
Brilliant. Right, now we're going to have to leave it right there, and it's time for a short break. And when we come back, we've spoken, I guess, to Cephas the campaigner, but we'll be talking to him as the entrepreneur. Do stay tuned. Well, I hope you enjoyed the break. Welcome back. My guest today is the campaigner, Cephas Williams. Now, Cephas, before the break, we spoke very much about, I guess, what was fueling 56 black men, but you've got some great support here. I mean, in terms of, tell us a bit about the advertising campaign, who's backing you, how it's happening.
Yeah, so in the advertising world, it was quite serious. So, you know, as I mentioned, we did the Guardian article, several other news channels picked us up, and then Clear Channel reached out to amplify it through out-of-home media.
So Clear Channel, major billboards around the country.
I'm saying it like it's light. I'm trying to be modest here, man.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's a major.
Great.
It's I mean, you couldn't get a bigger company behind you for this kind of.
And they're amazing people as well. So when I sat down with them actually in the office initially, the idea was, you know, after speaking to us, like, we believe in you, man. Do you know what I mean? So they amplified it across billboards all over the country, from London to York, everywhere.
So basically, millions of people able to see
like,
this
really
campaign.
serious. Like, when they sent me the spreadsheet for all the places it's going to be on, they sent me the spreadsheet. It was like 3 Excel documents. You couldn't see the end of the documents. On each Excel document, there's pages which says everywhere it's going to be. It's mad.
I mean, and a lot of this is digital as well, is it? And so
it's on loops, it's repeating. You know?
I mean, and from a campaigner's point of view, I mean, this is like sticking an outboard engine onto a boat. You're going very fast. I mean, organisationally, how do you have to step up? How do you have to change?
So that's interesting, because, and for me, I'm very big on strategy. So last year, part of the strategy, I wrote down in my book what I wanted to achieve, and fortunately, Clear Channel reached out before I started to reach out to billboards, but to be on billboards was part of the strategy. So for me, a big part of it is being agile, and I was expecting it anyway. So we just responded in kind. We received just under 1,000 emails before Clear Channel in 2 months.
And when you look at a business like that in terms of what it's buying into,
Clear Channel.
I mean, its job is advertising boards. I mean, this is a social issue on one level, right? You know, this is not their, you could argue, not their day job. I mean, in terms of what the purpose point, I guess, what they're buying into when they meet you, when they see the campaign, give us a sense of what lights went on for them.
It's probably best to ask them, but from our conversations, what I can detail, they just believed in me, and I feel like my ability to articulate what I'm trying to do, and when I sat down with them, they just looked at me and it was like, we believe in you. The campaign is great, but we believe in you. And I met everyone from the CEO to the CFO, everyone there is just, they believe.
I mean,
and they get it.
I guess a lot of people, that you'll be working with, a lot of people more generally, is that, you know, they often see business as a problem. But, you know, that many of the issues about inclusion are played out in boardrooms and organisations that are not particularly inclusive. When you look at business as being part of the change that you want to see happen, how good a job is it doing?
Yeah, well, it's you know, it depends on what position you stand in, but for my position, it feels like it's not great. You know what I mean? And we spoke a bit earlier with regards to, you know, do we run the risk of trying to be, you know, mad diverse and not really being inclusive? Yes, we do. You know what I mean? You can try and be as diverse as possible, but you know, if you don't actually include the people that you're trying to be diverse for in the conversation, and how inclusive are you, to the point of, you know, perhaps you can try and be extremely diverse, you miss inclusion completely. And
I mean, it is one of the great sort of, like, you know, puzzles, isn't it? Which is that we're living in one of the most diverse cities in the world, but its inclusivity record is nothing like that, diversity.
And moments, and I'd say it's one point. So I was talking to Nick before previously, and I mentioned him as well. You know, if this was to be manufactured by an organisation, it would have probably been called 56 BAME men. And everyone would have probably been wearing suits and ties.
Yeah.
And that probably, we wouldn't be sitting talking today, because, you know, it wouldn't have had the same impact, and it wouldn't communicate to the people.
So I interviewed Wilfred Emmanuel Jones, the black farmer, and he said he chose that brand because he said white people don't like saying black.
Yeah, well, there you go. And so for the first time in a long time, like, I've had people from the Mandim, you know what I mean, like the people on street level, like, bro, like, thanks for finally saying black, all the way to the boardroom, who have called me and sent me messages saying, like, thank you for finally saying black, because for the longest time in the boardroom, I feel like I'm not allowed. I have to say BAME.
So would you like to say a word like Bein Retired? I mean, it's like one of those words which is meant to sort of it's meant to be inclusive. Does it fail?
It does. I get why they use it. Call someone BAME and see how they respond. You know what I mean? So quick story, someone brought to me a campaign. It's like, look, bro, like, they started up like 20-something Pakistani men. It was like another thing that came off the back of, I guess, 56. They copied your idea. And I said, they didn't copy my idea. They've been liberated, because for the first time, they don't have to say Asian. They can say Pakistani.
Right. So language matters here, right?
Language and lived experience and understanding the people you're speaking for.
Do you get a sense, I mean, you know, we've got a position 5 or 6 years' time where 75% of the world's workforce will be millennial. Presumably that will be a very different generation in terms of its relationship with technology, with society. I mean, do you, when you look at the generational change, do you get excited about what that might deliver? Or do you still think that it'll be similar issues to face as we go forward?
My experience has taught me, I can't speak for the future because I don't live in it, but my experience has taught me that, you know, there's a balance in life, and there's, you know, pros and cons, good and evil, that kind of stuff. And it's less about, you know, whether we're going to create a perfect world, in my perspective, and more so about whether we're going to create a reflective world. And people that can reflect and say, are we doing it right? Are we not? Because you might intend to do something right, and perhaps...
How reflective do you think Britain is right now?
Michael, don't do me like that, bro.
But what do you think? I mean, it is.
I don't know.
I mean, a lot of what we're seeing in Britain at the moment is a lot of division over Brexit.
You're right, man.
I mean, how do you? I mean, but obviously you've suddenly got a big campaign with a big message,
well, I guess
and you want people to reflect.
I guess the campaign speaks for me. You know, it wasn't being done, so I did it.
So you did it, and you also did a very cool business called Drummer Boy, which happened to be your nickname.
Yeah, when I was like 14. Thanks for bringing that up.
But tell us about it. It's a very interesting business.
Michael.
Photography, video.
Yeah. So with Drummer Boy, it's really about how we take great architecture and bring it to the community. And this idea that in the wake of gentrification, they're knocking down buildings in the community and not really building anything for us. Again, similar to 56, instead of sitting here asking people to represent us right all day long, I'm doing it myself. So I walked away from my part 2 in architecture to start redeveloping these buildings, and we're in some really interesting conversations. One of the biggest architectural practices in Europe have agreed to be our development partner. We've engaged the likes of Richard Rogers, which is huge for me, you know what I mean, in the conversation. And now all we need to take that to the next level is to raise the funding to start building these places, man.
I mean, and that's an exceptional journey as an entrepreneur, made more exceptional that drumming was one of the things that I read that you did to cope with depression, to cope with all sorts of sort of mental illnesses that you were dealing with at the time.
Well, I think
to come forward. Tell us about actually how bad did it get?
Yeah. So just for the record, what you read, I don't know where you read it. The time frames might have been wrong. So I drummed before I was in depression. But I guess the narrative behind Drummer Boy and the strapline is dance to the beat of your own drum. And this idea that you dictate your own narrative, you dictate your own pulse, and you dictate your own rhythm. In a confusing world that's forever chucking different things at you, how do we, fulfill this idea of identity and, self-worth and purpose? And that's part of where that came from. But the depression part came after, and, I just got to a place in my life at the age of 16 where I felt like love didn't exist. And I was heavily depressed and I felt suicidal. And at that point in my room, I took everybody out of the world and I imagined the world with just me in it. And I said at that point, there's no reason for my existence. And so I started to add everybody back in one by one. And at that point, I came to the realization that without people, there's no purpose. And so perhaps I'm not necessarily here for myself.
And that was part of the
I'm here for everyone
but
else.
at the time, you didn't. You mean you weren't conversing?
Yes, I went mute. You've really done your research.
We went for a year.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So in and out of a year, I didn't really speak much. You know what I mean? I went mute. So, when I came out of that, I decided to put all the messages. It was quite deep, and I used to write on my walls. I decided to put all these messages on the clothing, and instead of calling it Cephas's message to the world, it was almost a alter ego. I called it Drummer Boy's message, and a narrative of let's change the rhythm.
But it makes all the things I think that you're doing now all the more extraordinary when you understand the personal journey of the campaigner.
I guess, yeah, true.
I mean, in terms of we're kind of like wrapping up now. In terms of like the next phase for you. I mean, if I was to make you mayor or prime minister for a day, what would you do for London? What would you do for Britain? Maybe that's our last question to you. I'm going to give you the keys to the door.
If I was the mayor or the prime minister,
that might not be a bad career route for you.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know, man. I would do me. I'd do what I do on a normal day, but more specifically to if I could speak to those two people and ask them to help with what I'm doing right now, I would ask them to put money behind what I'm trying to do with regeneration in the community from an architectural standpoint, and speak to their media comms team and the media industry as to how we can actually start to change that narrative. Because I hear a lot of talk on knife crime and I hear a lot of talk on the black man doing X, but I don't hear a lot of talk on what we can do to actually start to create a better environment.
Better environment, better story, better future. Cephas Williams, thank you very much for joining us on The Capital Conversation. And what a pleasure that's been. Thanks to my guest, Cephas Williams, someone who's drummed up an imaginative and memorable campaign to challenge unfair perceptions. It's a story that reminds us of the positive impact that campaigners can make, and also London as a home to people who dream, devise and deliver them. I'll see you for the next Capital Conversation. See you then.